My daughter was being wheeled into emergency surgery, and my mother-in-law looked me dead in the eyes and said, "We're only staying for the real granddaughter." Then she walked out with my husband. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just pulled out my phone and pressed record. My name is Daphne Merritt. I'm 34 years old, and I've been a mother for 6 years. Not 5 years and 8 months. Not almost 6 years. 6 full years, because motherhood doesn't start when the paperwork clears. It starts the moment you hold your child for the first time and realize you would walk through fire for them. Willa came into my life when she was 18 months old. I was 28, single, and working as an assistant manager at a small bakery in Ridgewood. I wasn't planning to adopt. I wasn't even sure I wanted kids at that point in my life. But my cousin had been fostering Willa for 3 months when her health declined, and she could no longer care for her. Social Services was preparing to move Willa to a new placement, and something inside me broke at the thought of this tiny girl being shuffled to yet another stranger's home. So I stepped in. I took the parenting classes. I filled out the mountains of paperwork. I converted my spare bedroom into a nursery and learned how to warm a bottle at 2 in the morning while half asleep. And when the adoption was finalized on Willa's 2nd birthday, I cried harder than I've ever cried in my life. Happy tears, grateful tears, the kind of tears that come when you realize your entire purpose has just shifted. For 3 years, it was just the two of us, Willa and me against the world. I got promoted to bakery manager. We moved into a bigger apartment. I taught her how to ride a tricycle and how to count to 20 and how to make chocolate chip pancakes on Sunday mornings. She called me mommy before she could even say it clearly, and every time that word left her little mouth, I felt like my heart might explode. Then I met Gordon. Gordon Merritt was 32 when we started dating. He worked as a logistics coordinator for a shipping company, the kind of steady, reliable job that came with decent benefits and predictable hours. He was tall, quiet, and had this calm energy that made me feel safe. On our 3rd date, I told him about Willa. I explained that I was a package deal, that my daughter came first, and that if he couldn't accept that, we should end things now before anyone got hurt. He told me he understood. He told me family was everything to him. He told me he couldn't wait to meet her. And for a while, everything seemed perfect. Gordon was patient with Willa. He read her bedtime stories and taught her how to catch a softball. When we got married 2 years later, Willa was our flower girl, and she walked down the aisle scattering rose petals with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. Gordon even asked if he could legally adopt her after the wedding, and I remember crying again because I thought I had found someone who loved my daughter the way I did. But Gordon came with baggage, and that baggage had a name. Opal Merritt was 62 years old and had raised Gordon as a single mother after his father left when Gordon was 7. She worked double shifts as a hospital administrator to put him through college. She sacrificed everything for him, and she made sure he never forgot it. Gordon worshipped his mother. He called her every single day, sometimes twice. He asked her opinion on everything from which car to buy to which restaurant to choose for our anniversary dinner. And from the moment Opal met Willa, I could see something cold settle behind her eyes. She never said anything outright at first. It was all subtle, small, the kind of cruelty you can't quite prove. When Willa showed her a drawing she made at preschool, Opal glanced at it and said, "That's nice," then turned back to her phone. When Willa tried to hug her, Opal would stiffen and pat her on the head like she was an unfamiliar dog. At Christmas, Opal gave detailed, thoughtful gifts to Gordon and later to Brinley. But Willa's presents were always afterthoughts. A generic coloring book, a stuffed animal with the price tag still on. One year, she gave Willa a gift card to a store that had gone out of business 2 months earlier. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself Opal was just old-fashioned, that she needed time to warm up. Gordon always defended her. "That's just how Mom is," he would say. "She doesn't mean anything by it." But I saw how Willa's face fell every time Opal looked past her. I saw how my daughter started hesitating before speaking to her grandmother, like she was bracing for rejection. And I saw how everything changed when Brinley was born. Brinley arrived 3 years into our marriage. She was perfect and healthy and had Gordon's eyes. And from the moment Opal held her in the hospital, something shifted in the family dynamic that I could never undo. Suddenly, Opal was involved. She wanted to babysit. She wanted to buy matching outfits. She wanted professional photos taken of her and her granddaughter. Singular. When I pointed out that she had 2 granddaughters, Opal smiled tightly and said, "Of course, but you know what I mean." I knew exactly what she meant. Brinley was blood. Willa was not. And in Opal's mind, that distinction meant everything. For the next 3 years, I watched the gap widen. Brinley got a gold bracelet for her first birthday. Willa got a $20 bill in a plain envelope for her 6th. Family photos at Opal's house featured Brinley prominently in the center, while Willa was positioned at the edge, almost cropped out. When Gordon's aunt asked about the grandchildren, Opal would talk endlessly about Brinley's milestones and barely mention Willa's name. I fought back in small ways. I made sure Willa knew she was loved. I threw her elaborate birthday parties. I told her every single day that she was my daughter, my heart, my everything. But I couldn't force Opal to love her, and I couldn't force Gordon to stand up to his mother. That brings us to the day everything shattered. It was a Saturday morning, and we were supposed to have brunch at Opal's house, a family tradition she insisted on every other weekend. Willa had been complaining about her stomach since she woke up, but I assumed it was just nerves. She always got anxious before visits to Grandma's house. By 10 o'clock, her complaints had turned to tears. By 11, she was doubled over on the bathroom floor, burning with fever. I knew something was seriously wrong. I told Gordon we needed to go to the emergency room immediately. He called Opal to cancel brunch, and of course, she insisted on meeting us at the hospital. She brought Brinley along because she had been watching her that morning. The emergency room at Ridgewood Memorial was crowded and loud, but they took one look at Willa and rushed her to the front of the line. The doctor examined her and ordered immediate imaging. 20 minutes later, he came back with a grim expression. Acute appendicitis. Signs of rupture. She needed emergency surgery within the hour. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. My baby girl was about to be cut open, and there was nothing I could do but sign consent forms and pray. They let me walk beside her gurney as they wheeled her toward the operating room. Willa was pale and scared, her small hand gripping mine so tightly I could feel her pulse racing against my palm. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice thin with pain, "will you be here when I wake up?" I leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I will never leave you," I told her. "I promise. When you open your eyes, I'll be right there." She nodded, trusting me completely, and then the double doors swung closed between us. I stood there for a long moment, staring at those doors, trying to hold myself together. When I finally turned around, I saw Opal pulling Gordon aside near the vending machines. They were speaking in low voices, but the waiting room was quiet enough that I could hear every word. "Gordon, there's no reason for all of us to sit here for hours," Opal was saying. "Brinley is tired and hungry. Let's take her home and get her settled." "Mom, Willa's having surgery," Gordon replied. "We should stay and support Daphne." Opal shook her head impatiently. "That child is not your blood. Brinley is your daughter, your real daughter. She needs you more than Daphne does right now. Daphne can handle this on her own. Willa was her project before you came along." Project. She called my daughter a project. Like Willa was a hobby I picked up instead of a human being I had raised and loved for 6 years. I watched Gordon's face. I watched him hesitate. I watched him glance at Brinley sleeping in her carrier, then at the operating room doors, then at his mother, and I watched him make his choice. He walked over to me with that apologetic look had seen 100 times before, the look that meant he was about to disappoint me, but wanted me to forgive him anyway. "Daff, maybe Mom's right," he said quietly. "Brinley's getting fussy. She missed her nap. We'll take her home and come back as soon as the surgery's done. A few hours, tops." I stared at him. My daughter was on an operating table. Her appendix had ruptured. She could die on that table, and my husband was worried about a missed nap. "Fine," I said. My voice came out flat and cold, but inside I was screaming. "Go." Opal picked up Brinley's carrier and walked toward the exit without looking at me. But just before she reached the door, she turned back. And what she said next will stay with me for the rest of my life. "We're only staying for the real granddaughter," she said calmly. "And since she's coming with us, there's no point in waiting." Then she walked out, and Gordon followed her. I stood alone in that waiting room, watching the doors close behind them. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A television in the corner played a muted news broadcast. Somewhere down the hall, a child was crying. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't chase after them and beg. Instead, I sat down in a hard plastic chair, pulled out my phone, and opened the camera. I turned it to face me. pressed the red button and started talking. Because if they were going to pretend my daughter didn't matter, I was going to make sure they never forgot this moment. I was going to make sure they saw exactly who they were. The pediatric emergency room at Ridgewood Memorial Hospital smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee. It was 2:47 on a Saturday afternoon, and I was sitting in a plastic chair that had probably held 1,000 other terrified parents before me. The waiting room was nearly empty now, just me, a vending machine humming in the corner, and the muffled sounds of medical equipment beeping somewhere down the hall. I kept staring at the double doors where they had taken Willa. Every time they swung open, my heart jumped into my throat, hoping it was someone with news. But it was always a nurse heading somewhere else, or a technician pushing an empty wheelchair, or a janitor mopping floors that were already clean. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my thighs to make them stop, but the trembling just moved up into my shoulders, my chest, my jaw. I was holding myself together with nothing but willpower and the promise I had made to my daughter. This morning had started so normally. That was the cruelest part. Willa had woken up complaining that her tummy hurt, but she often said that before visits to Opal's house. I had learned to recognize her anxiety symptoms over the years, the stomach aches, the quiet withdrawal, the way she would suddenly become very interested in her shoes whenever her grandmother entered the room. I gave her some ginger ale and told her she would feel better. After breakfast, she managed half a piece of toast before pushing her plate away and curling up on the couch. By 10 o'clock, she was crying. By 11, she could barely stand. When I touched her forehead and felt the heat radiating off her skin, I knew this was not anxiety. This was something much worse. Gordon drove us to the hospital while I sat in the back seat with Willa's head in my lap. She was whimpering softly, her small body rigid with pain. I stroked her hair and told her everything was going to be okay, even though I had no idea if that was true. I just kept talking because the silence was unbearable and because I needed her to know I was there. The emergency room staff moved fast. One look at Willa's distended abdomen, and they had her on a gurney and heading for imaging before I could finish filling out the intake forms. The doctor who examined her was young, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes and a calm voice that did nothing to slow my racing heart. "Mrs. Merritt, your daughter has acute appendicitis," he told me. "The imaging shows signs that it may have already ruptured. We need to operate immediately to prevent further complications." Ruptured. The word hit me like a punch to the stomach. I knew enough about medicine to understand what that meant. Infection, sepsis. The possibility that my 7-year-old daughter might not survive a condition that should have been routine. "How did I miss this?" I asked, my voice cracking. "She only started complaining this morning. I thought it was just nerves." The doctor shook his head gently. "Appendicitis can progress very quickly, especially in children. You got her here in time. That's what matters." But I did not feel like I had done anything right. I felt like I had failed her by not recognizing the signs sooner. I felt like every minute I had wasted making her eat breakfast or waiting to see if she felt better was a minute that could have cost her life. They let me walk with her to the operating room doors. The hallway seemed endless, fluorescent lights flickering overhead, the wheels of the gurney squeaking against the polished floor. Willa was pale and small beneath the white hospital blanket. An IV line snaked from her arm to a bag of clear fluid hanging on a metal pole. She looked so fragile, so young, so completely dependent on strangers to save her life. She reached for my hand, and I took it. Her fingers were cold and trembling. "Mommy, I'm scared." I leaned down so my face was close to hers. "I know, sweetheart, but these doctors are going to take such good care of you. And when you wake up, I'm going to be right there waiting, I promise." "You won't leave?" "I will never leave you, Willa. Not ever." She nodded, her eyes wet with tears. She was trying hard not to let fall. My brave girl, my beautiful brave girl who had already faced more rejection in her 7 years than most people face in a lifetime. The surgical team gently pulled the gurney forward, and I had to let go of her hand. I watched her disappear through those double doors, and I felt like part of my soul went with her. I do not know how long I stood there. Seconds, maybe. Minutes. Time had stopped making sense. When I finally turned around, I saw Gordon and Opal standing near the vending machines, and I heard the conversation that would change everything. I heard my mother-in-law dismiss my daughter as a project. I heard my husband agree to leave. I watched them walk out of that hospital like Willa was nothing more than an inconvenience. And something inside me shifted permanently. I was terrified for my daughter. I was heartbroken by my husband. But beneath the fear and the grief, something else was growing. Something cold and clear and determined. They wanted to pretend Willa did not matter. They wanted to erase her from the family narrative and focus only on the child who shared their blood. But I had spent 6 years protecting my daughter from a world that often told adopted children they were less than. I had fought for her when agencies questioned my ability to parent alone. I had fought for her when strangers asked intrusive questions about her real mother. I had fought for her every single day since the moment I first held her in my arms. I was not going to stop fighting now. I sat down in that empty waiting room, surrounded by silence and fear, and I made a decision. I was going to document everything. Every word Opal had said, every choice Gordon had made, every moment of this nightmare that they would later try to deny or minimize or explain away. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and pressed record. I held my phone steady and looked directly into the camera. The waiting room was quiet except for the low hum of the air conditioning and the distant murmur of hospital announcements. My face was pale in the screen, my eyes red-rimmed but dry. I had no tears left, only clarity. "Today is Saturday, March 15th, I began, keeping my voice calm and measured. It is 3:12 in the afternoon, and I am sitting in the pediatric surgical waiting room at Ridgewood Memorial Hospital. My 7-year-old daughter, Willa, is currently in emergency surgery for a ruptured appendix. She was wheeled into the operating room approximately 25 minutes ago." I paused to take a breath, steadying myself against the weight of what I was about to say. 15 minutes ago, my mother-in-law, Opal Merritt, told me that she and my husband, Gordon, were leaving the hospital. When I asked why, she said, and I'm quoting her exact words, "We're only staying for the real granddaughter, and since she's coming with us, there's no point in waiting." She was referring to my 3-year-old biological daughter, Brinley. She was making it clear that Willa, the child I adopted before I ever met her son, does not count as family to her. I swallowed hard against the lump forming in my throat. My husband did not argue with her. He did not defend Willa. He did not stay. He apologized to me, said Brinley was tired and left with his mother. My daughter is fighting for her life behind those doors, and her stepfather chose his mother's comfort over being here for her. I turned the camera slightly to show the empty chairs surrounding me. This is what support looks like in my marriage. This is what family looks like to the Merritts. An empty room and a mother sitting alone while her child is in surgery. I ended the recording and saved it to my phone. Then I opened my notes app and began typing everything I could remember. Every dismissive comment Opal had made over the years. Every time Gordon had chosen his mother's feelings over mine. Every birthday where Willa received a thoughtless gift while Brinley was showered with attention. I typed until my fingers ached, until I had pages of documentation that painted a clear picture of the pattern I had been living with for 4 years. The minutes crawled by like hours. I tried to distract myself by watching the muted television mounted in the corner, but I could not focus on anything except the doors to the surgical wing. Every time they opened, I sat up straight, searching for a doctor, a nurse, anyone who could tell me my daughter was okay. At some point, a woman in scrubs approached me. She was in her 50s with short gray hair and a kind face that immediately made me want to cry. "Mrs. Merritt? I'm Ruth Ann. I'm one of the surgical nurses. I wanted to let you know that Willa is doing well so far. The surgeon is working carefully to clean the infection. It's going to be a few more hours, but she's stable." "Thank you," I managed to say. "Thank you so much." Ruth Ann glanced around the empty waiting room, then back at me. "Is there anyone here with you, hun? Anyone I can call?" I shook my head. My husband had to leave. Family obligations. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but I was not ready to explain the truth to a stranger. Ruth Ann studied me for a moment, and I could tell she saw through my words. Nurses always do. They spend their lives reading people in crisis. "Well, I'm going to check on you every hour or so," she said gently. "And there's a coffee machine down the hall, second door on the left. It's not great coffee, but it's hot. You need anything, you just ask for Ruth Ann, okay?" "Okay," I whispered. "Thank you." She squeezed my shoulder before heading back through the double doors. I was alone again, but her kindness had cracked something open inside me. I pulled out my phone and called my mother. Francine answered on the second ring. "Daphne? Sweetheart, what's wrong? You sound upset." The sound of her voice broke the dam I had been holding back. I told her everything. The emergency, the surgery, Opal's words, Gordon's betrayal. I talked until I was hoarse, and my mother listened without interrupting, the way she always did when I needed her most. "I'm going to kill him," she said when I finished. "I'm going to drive up there and kill them both." "Mom, you're in Delaware. That's a 6-hour drive." "I don't care. My granddaughter is in the hospital, and those people left you alone. I'm coming." "You don't have to do that." "Daphne Marie, I am your mother. When you hurt, I hurt. When Willa hurts, I hurt. I am getting in my car right now, and I will be there by tonight. Don't argue with me." I smiled for the first time in hours. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, sweetheart. And I love that little girl like she came from my own body. Don't you ever forget that." I hung up feeling slightly less alone. My mother was coming. My daughter was stable, and I had evidence of exactly what kind of people I was dealing with. Now I just had to wait. The hours passed in a blur of stale coffee and silent prayers. I must have checked my phone 100 times, watching the minutes tick by while my daughter lay on an operating table somewhere beyond those double doors. Ruth Ann came by twice more to update me, each time assuring me that Willa was holding strong and the surgical team was making good progress. At 5:47 in the evening, the surgeon finally emerged. Dr. Callahan was a tall woman with silver streaks in her dark hair and steady hands that had just saved my daughter's life. She pulled down her surgical mask as she approached me, and I searched her face desperately for any sign of bad news. "Mrs. Merritt, Willa came through the surgery beautifully," she said, and I felt my entire body sag with relief. The appendix had ruptured, but we were able to remove it and clean out the infection before it spread further. She's going to need IV antibiotics for a few days and close monitoring, but I expect her to make a full recovery. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle the sob that escaped. "Can I see her?" "She's being moved to the pediatric recovery unit now. Give us about 20 minutes to get her settled, and then a nurse will come get you. She's going to be groggy from the anesthesia, but she's been asking for her mommy." Those words nearly broke me. My brave little girl, waking up from surgery with only one thought on her mind. She wanted her mother, and unlike everyone else in her life, I had kept my promise. I was still here. I thanked Dr. Callahan profusely, shaking her hand and fighting back tears. After she left, I collapsed into my chair and let myself cry. Not from sadness this time, but from overwhelming gratitude and exhaustion, and the release of hours of suffocating fear. Willa was going to be okay. My baby was going to live. I pulled out my phone and texted my mother the good news. She responded immediately, telling me she was already past the Pennsylvania border and would be at the hospital by 9 o'clock. Then I sat in the quiet waiting room and let myself breathe for the first time since this nightmare began. 20 minutes later, a young nurse led me to Willa's room in the pediatric unit. The hallway was painted with cheerful murals of cartoon animals, a stark contrast to the sterile environment of the surgical wing. When we reached room 412, the nurse opened the door softly and gestured for me to enter. Willa was lying in a hospital bed that seemed far too big for her small body. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped and hummed with reassuring steadiness. Her face was pale, her eyes half closed, but when she heard my footsteps, she turned her head and smiled weakly. "Mommy," she whispered, "you stayed." I rushed to her bedside and took her hand, careful not to disturb the IV line taped to her wrist. "I told you I would never leave. I meant it. My tummy hurts." "I know, sweetheart. The doctors fixed what was making you sick, but it's going to be sore for a little while. They're giving you medicine to help with the pain." Willa nodded slowly, her eyelids drooping. "Where's Daddy?" The question hit me like a knife to the chest. I had known it was coming, but that did not make it any easier to answer. "Daddy had to take Brinley home," I said carefully, "but he's going to come back soon to see you." "And Grandma?" "Grandma went home too." Willa was quiet for a moment. Even through the fog of anesthesia, I could see her processing this information, could see the old familiar hurt settling into her features. "Grandma doesn't like me very much," she said softly. Does she? My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. 7 years old, and she already understood what the adults in her life refused to acknowledge. She had felt Opal's coldness. She had absorbed every dismissive glance, every thoughtless gift, every moment of being treated as less than. I squeezed her hand gently. Willa, I need you to listen to me. You are loved. You are wanted. You are my daughter, and nothing in this world will ever change that. Some people have small hearts that can only hold so much love. That's their problem, not yours. Do you understand? She nodded, a single tear sliding down her cheek. I understand, Mommy. Good. Now I want you to rest. I'm going to be right here in this chair all night. When you wake up, I'll still be here. I promise. Okay, she murmured, her eyes finally closing. Within minutes, she was asleep. I watched her chest rise and fall in steady rhythm, listened to the beeping of the heart monitor, and felt something settle inside me. A certainty, a resolve. I looked at my phone, at the video I had recorded and the pages of notes I had typed. Gordon and Opal would come back eventually. They would walk into this room expecting everything to return to normal, expecting me to forgive and forget, the way I always had before. But this time would be different. This time, I was ready. At 9:34 in the evening, my mother arrived. Francine burst into Willa's hospital room like a woman on a mission, her silver hair windswept from the drive and her eyes blazing with protective fury. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe, then immediately moved to Willa's bedside and kissed her sleeping granddaughter's forehead. "That beautiful girl," she whispered, "my beautiful grandbaby." We sat together in the dim room, talking in hushed voices while Willa slept. I told my mother everything again, showed her the video, let her read through my notes. Her face grew harder with every word. "I never liked that woman," Francine said quietly. "From the moment I met Opal at your wedding, I knew she was trouble. The way she looked at Willa like she was an inconvenience. The way Gordon jumped every time his mother snapped her fingers. I should have said something years ago." I kept hoping it would get better, I admitted. I thought if I was patient enough, kind enough, accommodating enough, eventually Opal would accept Willa. Eventually Gordon would stand up for our family. Some people don't change, sweetheart. They just get better at hiding who they really are. At 10:17, my phone buzzed with a text from Gordon. "Surgery done? Heading back to hospital now? Mom is coming too." I stared at the message for a long moment. 6 hours. They had been gone for 6 hours while my daughter fought for her life, and now they were coming back like nothing had happened, expecting to resume their places in our family as if they had not abandoned us when we needed them most. "They're on their way," I told my mother. Francine's eyes narrowed. "Good. I have a few things I'd like to say to that woman. Mom, please, let me handle this." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but I'm staying in this room. And if that woman says one wrong word to my granddaughter, all bets are off." 20 minutes later, Gordon walked through the door. He was carrying a stuffed teddy bear from the hospital gift shop and wearing the expression of a man who knew he was in trouble, but hoped charm might save him. Opal followed close behind, her face arranged in a careful mask of concern that did not reach her eyes. "How is she?" Gordon asked, moving toward Willa's bed. "The doctor said everything went well." "She's stable," I replied, my voice flat. "No thanks to you." Gordon flinched. "Daphne, I know you're upset, but Brinley was exhausted and Mom thought it would be better to—" "Stop." I held up my hand. "I don't want to hear excuses. Not right now." Opal cleared her throat. "Daphne, there's no need to be dramatic. The child is fine. Everything worked out." I felt my mother stiffen beside me, but I kept my focus on Opal. That word. Child. Not Willa, not your granddaughter, just the child, like she was discussing a stranger's kid. "Sit down," I said calmly, "both of you. There's something I want you to see." Gordon exchanged a confused glance with his mother, but they both sat in the chairs near the window. I pulled out my phone, opened the video I had recorded in the waiting room, and handed it to Gordon. "Press play." He did. I watched his face as my voice filled the quiet room, recounting Opal's exact words. "We're only staying for the real granddaughter." His expression shifted from confusion to discomfort to something approaching shame. Beside him, Opal's mask cracked. Her cheeks flushed red, and her lips pressed into a thin, furious line. "You recorded me," she hissed. "That's a complete violation of my privacy. You had no right to—" "I recorded the truth," I interrupted. "That's all." Gordon handed the phone back to me, his hand trembling slightly. "Daphne, I don't know what to say. I didn't realize how it sounded. Mom was just trying to help with Brinley, and I thought—" "You thought wrong." I stood up and positioned myself between them and Willa's bed, a barrier protecting my daughter, even in her sleep. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm taking Willa home when she's released. You can come with us, Gordon, or you can go with your mother. But if you come with us, things change. Permanently." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Willa is our daughter. Not my project, not my baggage, our daughter. And if your mother can't treat her like family, then your mother doesn't get to be part of our family anymore. No more Sunday brunches, no more holidays, no more pretending everything is fine while she makes my child feel worthless." Opal shot to her feet. "Gordon, are you going to let her speak to me this way? After everything I've sacrificed for you?" Gordon looked at his mother, then at me, then at Willa, small and pale in her hospital bed. And for the first time in our marriage, I saw him truly see his daughter. Not his stepdaughter, not Daphne's project, his daughter. "Mom," he said quietly, "she's right. I should have stayed." Opal's face contorted with disbelief. She stared at her son like he had just spoken a foreign language, like the words coming out of his mouth could not possibly be real. "Gordon, you can't be serious," she said, her voice sharp with desperation. "This woman is manipulating you. She recorded me without my consent. She's trying to turn you against your own mother." Gordon shook his head slowly. "No, Mom. She's trying to protect her daughter, our daughter, and I should have been doing the same thing all along. That girl is not your daughter. She never was. Blood is what makes a family, Gordon. Blood is what matters." My mother stood up from her chair, unable to stay silent any longer. "With all due respect, Opal, that's the most ignorant thing I've ever heard. I've watched Daphne raise Willa since she was a baby. I've watched her sacrifice sleep and money and her entire social life to give that little girl a good home. Willa is more her daughter than biology could ever make her. And if you can't see that, then you're the one who doesn't understand what family means." Opal turned to Francine with cold fury in her eyes. "This is none of your business. My granddaughter is lying in a hospital bed after emergency surgery. My daughter sat alone in a waiting room for 6 hours because you decided Willa wasn't worth your time. That makes it absolutely my business." The room fell silent. Willa stirred slightly in her sleep, and we all froze, watching her settle back into stillness. When I looked at Gordon, I saw tears forming in his eyes. "Mom, I think you should go," he said quietly. Opal's mouth fell open. "Excuse me?" "I need to stay here with my family, with Daphne and Willa. We can talk later, but right now, I think it's best if you leave." For a moment, I thought Opal might explode. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, and her face turned a dangerous shade of crimson. But then something shifted in her expression. A realization, perhaps, that she had pushed too far, that she had finally exposed the ugliness she had kept hidden for so long, and there was no taking it back. She grabbed her purse from the chair and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned back one last time. "You're making a mistake, Gordon. When this marriage falls apart, don't come crying to me." Then she was gone. The silence she left behind was heavy, but also strangely peaceful, like the air after a storm passes through. Gordon sank into the chair beside Willa's bed and buried his face in his hands. "I'm so sorry, Daphne," he whispered. "I've been a coward. For years, I've let my mother treat Willa differently because it was easier than confronting her. I told myself it wasn't that bad. I told myself Willa didn't notice. But she did, didn't she?" "Yes," I said softly. "She did. Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at my husband, really looked at him for the first time in months. I saw the guilt etched into his features. I saw the shame in his eyes. And I saw something else too, a genuine desire to change, to be better. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly, "but I'm willing to try on one condition." "Anything." We go to counseling together. We work through this with a professional who can help us communicate and rebuild trust. And you set firm boundaries with your mother. If she can't treat both of our daughters equally, she doesn't get access to either of them. Gordon nodded without hesitation. Done. Whatever it takes. Willa woke up the next morning to find both of her parents sitting beside her bed. She looked at Gordon with surprise and uncertainty, like she was waiting for him to disappear again. "Daddy stayed?" she asked softly. Gordon took her small hand in his and squeezed it gently. "I'm here, sweetheart, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm so sorry I left yesterday. That was wrong of me. Can you forgive me?" Willa studied his face for a long moment with a wisdom far beyond her 7 years. Then she nodded. "I forgive you, Daddy." The recovery took time. 3 days in the hospital, followed by 2 weeks of rest at home. My mother stayed with us for the first week, cooking meals and helping with Brinley while I focused on Willa's care. Gordon took time off work to be present. And for the first time in our marriage, I felt like we were truly functioning as a team. We started couples counseling the week after Willa was cleared by her doctor. It was hard work, dredging up years of resentment and miscommunication and hurt feelings. But we were both committed to doing better, to being better. 3 weeks after the surgery, Opal sent Gordon a text message. "I'd like to talk." He showed it to me before responding. "What do you think?" "I think that's your decision to make. But if she comes to this house, she needs to apologize to Willa, not to me, to the little girl she called not real." Gordon agreed. He invited Opal over the following Sunday. She arrived looking older than I had ever seen her, smaller somehow, like the confrontation at the hospital had deflated something inside her. She sat stiffly in our living room while Willa was brought in from her bedroom. "Willa," Opal began, her voice strained. "I owe you an apology. I said some things that were hurtful and wrong. I haven't always treated you the way a grandmother should. I'm sorry." It was not the most eloquent apology. It was not even particularly warm, but it was something. A crack in the wall she had built around herself. Willa looked at her grandmother with those big, serious eyes. Then she said something that made me prouder than I have ever been. "It's okay, Grandma. I forgive you. Holding on to anger only hurts yourself." Out of the mouths of babes, Opal visits occasionally now. She is not a different person, but she is making an effort, small gestures of kindness toward Willa that add up over time. It is not perfect. It may never be perfect, but it is progress. Someone once asked me if I regret recording that video in the hospital waiting room. I told them absolutely not. That video forced everyone to confront a truth they had been ignoring for years. Sometimes love means holding a mirror up to the people who should know better. Sometimes it means refusing to let them hide from their own ugliness. Willa asked me once if she was really part of our family. I told her the truth then, and I will repeat it now. Family is not about blood. It is about who shows up. It is about who stays when things get hard. It is about who holds your hand in the darkness and promises to be there when you wake up. And I will always be there for my daughter. Always. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time when you had to stand up for someone you love. And if you have not already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Your support means the world to me. And together, we are building a community that believes in the power of love, courage, and family. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.